Good evening, everyone. This week's Parshat is Parshas Vayakhel, Tavshin Pei Daled. Learning should be a schus, a merit for the safety of the Israeli soldiers, the safety of and the return of the captives, safety for Jews living in Eretz Yisrael, safety for Jews living all over the world, Jewish students on universities. We should see shalom, we should see peace in the world. Okay. Parshas Vayakhel begins Parak Lamed Hey Pasuk Aleph, chapter 35, verse 1. Vayakhel Moshe Kaladas B'nai Yisrael. Moshe assembled the entire assembly of the Jewish people. Vayamar Lehem, and he said to them, Eila Hadvarim, these are the things Asher Tziva Hashem La'asais Eisam, that Hashem has commanded to do them. And then Moshe proceeds to talk about Shabbos and to talk about donating towards the Mishkan. Now, Rashi points out on the words that Moshe assembled the entire assembly of the Jewish people, when did Moshe do this? When did Moshe gather the entire people together and address them? As we have in this week's Parsha. The answer is, it was the day after Yom Kippur when he came down from Mount Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu had 3 40-day periods on Sinai to receive the Torah for the first time, to pray for the Jewish people after the sin of the golden calf, and to go up a third time to bring down the second luchas, the second tablets. He came down on Yom Kippur with them. The day after Yom Kippur, he assembled the Jewish people together. The commentary Kli Yakar points out that the Torah actually tells us that something else took place on the day after Yom Kippur. If we go back to Shmos Yud Ches Yud Gimel, back to chapter 18, verse 13, there we have Vahimi Macharas, and it was the day after. Vayashav Moshe Lishpait Es Ha'am, Moshe sat to judge the people. Vayamod Ha'am Moshe Min HaBoker Ad Ha'arev, and the people stood by Moshe from the morning until the evening. This is Parshas Yisro. Parshas Yisro begins with Yisro coming to the Jewish people, and the Torah tells us, and the next day, Moshe was judging the Jewish people. They all stood in line waiting for him. Yisro saw this and he said to Moshe, you're going to wear yourself out. You're going to wear out the Jewish people. You've got to create a judicial system. Okay. But the Torah says, Vahimi Macharas, it was the next day. The next day from what? So Rashi tells us it's not the next day after Yisro arrived. But the point of the Macharas, Rashi tells us the Macharas there is L'machras Yom HaKippurim. Again, the day after Yom Kippur. The day after Moshe came down with the second tablets, that is when Moshe sat to judge the people, and the entire episode with Yisro's advice took place. So we've got 2 things happening on the same day. We have Moshe judging the people on that day, on the day after Yom Kippur, and we have Moshe telling the Jewish people to donate towards the construction of the Mishkan on the day after Yom Kippur. That's a lot to do in one day. Was he able to do both in one day? Is it just, so to speak, coincidence that the 2 things came together? Or is there some kind of connection between them? Kli Yakar explains that there was a connection. And the connection he says is the following. Moshe now came down from Mount Sinai the day after Yom Kippur, and he was meant to speak to the Jewish people about donating towards the construction of the Mishkan. But Moshe was concerned. The Jewish people were going to be donating the materials, the gold, the silver, the copper, the wool, all the material, the precious stones, all these materials were going to be donated by the Jewish people. But Moshe understood that if, let's say, you have an object, a person has an object and wants to donate, and there's someone else who lays claim to that object, these 2 people are having a dispute about the object. And the person who has the object is going to say, well, I got it. I have it. I am the rightful owner of it. And he donates it. So it comes out that the Mishkan is going to be constructed on material that's not necessarily honest. That's not necessarily clean. The person donating it thinks he's right. And because he's right, he's got it. He's going to go ahead and work with it as if it's his and donate it. And he's wrong. He may be wrong. And the Shekhinah, the divine presence of Hashem, which is meant to rest in the Mishkan, cannot rest in an edifice that is not completely clean. If there's any kind of problem with the money, if the money that has been donated wrongfully, dishonestly, even if the person thinks he's right, at the end of the day, the divine presence cannot rest in such a mishkan, in such an edifice, in such a place. Therefore, Moshe realized that immediately he must sit down and start adjudicating between parties. If there's anybody has any kind of conflict monetarily about something, they should come to him. When Moshe sat down to judge the people primarily has a connotation of when people have a dispute, they come to him. They come to a judge to take care to work things out. So Moshe sat down to be able to adjudicate between people to make sure that everybody has the money that's rightfully theirs before they donate. So Moshe's sitting down to judge day after Yom Kippur was to enable the donations that for the Mishkan that were going to be announced on that day to make sure that they're given over properly and honestly. Now, the Kli Yakar points out, Moshe could not have been able to judge everybody the entire day, although it says from even morning until evening. He said, evening until morning. He says that can be interpreted in a different way. It doesn't have to be literal. And it can't be that he did it the entire day, because then when did he announce to the Jewish people about donating? When did he announce? How did he do it? There was no time. So the answer is that, no, he didn't judge the entire day, but rather part of the day he judged, part of the day he gathered the people to make this announcement about donating towards the Mishkan. And even though, now you can't, so if there were cases to be judged, you couldn't judge everybody in that one day. So he points out that we know that the donations for the Mishkan didn't just happen in one day. They went over for, I think about 2 days, for 2 days. So there was more time for judging. And he says, perhaps Moshe told the Jewish people that anything that there's a dispute about, you cannot donate it until you work it out. And Moshe Rabbeinu started the judging. He wanted, one can maybe argue even 3 days maybe wouldn't have been enough. 2 days wouldn't have been enough. 3 days wouldn't have been enough. But the point is Moshe wanted to show the Jewish people this is serious. And therefore he judged them. He put in the time to judge them. And even if he couldn't finish judging, he made it clear to them, do not donate something that's not clean, 100% clean. If there's anybody you have a dispute about over something, do not donate it. He judged them about it and actually started the process in order to make sure that people understood this was very serious and very real. So the fact that these two things came together in one day isn't a coincidence, but rather one was complementing the other. According to this answer of the Kli Yakar, the main point or the main announcement for that day, the main item on the agenda for that day was to announce, to tell the Jewish people about donating, in order to make sure that was done properly. And honestly, Moshe began judging the Jewish people to make sure that they donated only that which was honest and clean, and to work that out. And at least to tell them and to make it clear to them that whatever there was a question about, they should not donate. That is the Kli Yakar's first explanation. His next explanation is the following, and that is that, and I'll say it the way I understand it, and that is that Moshe was going to announce to the Jewish people that they were all meant to donate towards the construction of the Mishkan. The Mishkan was meant to be the focal point of the Jewish people. It is the central point that everything revolves around. And that the Jewish people were to come together as one through the Mishkan. The Mishkan was meant to unite them. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu understood that if the Jewish people are to become united around the Mishkan, they have to be united. If they're in the midst of having problems with each other, then it's hard to tell them, come and unite around the Mishkan. They kind of have to work out between each other whatever problems they have. And then with that unity that they have in their regular lives between each other, now they can be told, now you need to come around the Mishkan, unite around the Mishkan, and to have that as a source of unity from then on. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu judges them. Why? He judges them to make sure that they're not quarreling with each other. The thing that tears people apart is when they argue over monetary issues. So Moshe sits down to judge them, to start working to work things out for them so that they can be unified. That's why he's judging them. Now, the fact that it's happening the day after Yom Kippur, says the Kli Yakar, is part of the formula, so to speak. Yom Kippur is a day of forgiveness. Yom Kippur is a day that we forgive each other. It's a day when, as our sages say, we're like angels. There's no jealousy amongst angels. On Yom Kippur, we come together, we purify ourselves, and we understand that all the things that tear us apart in life are meaningless, and we need to forgive each other and become one with each other. So the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu announced it after the donations after Yom Kippur was all part of the strategy. The strategy was to speak to the Jewish people about uniting when they're united. The day after Yom Kippur, the day after forgiveness, they are now united. They have come together as one. And now is the time to tell them that you need to unite. Everybody should donate around to the Mishkan, which will now become your focal point that will unite you all. So he does it after the day after Yom Kippur, because it was right after Yom Kippur when people have forgiven each other and come together more. But now he still has to take care of a different problem. If somebody owes money if somebody owes money to someone, or someone who's withholding money from someone wrongfully, Yom Kippur is not going to help for that. You have to work that out. Yom Kippur can't just annul debts, can't annul if you're holding out to somebody's money wrongfully. That is something that has to be worked out. Yom Kippur can't take care of that for you. Therefore, Moshe judged the Jewish people to take care of that impediment to unity. There should be no fighting between Jews over monetary disputes. Settle that part of unity. So now you've got the unity of Yom Kippur, when we all forgive each other for things we have done to each other. The judging has now taken care of any kind of monetary disputes, any possibility of a breakup of unity due to fighting over money. And now we can tell the Jewish people to donate as a whole, as a community, as a nation. And that this is meant to be the thing that is you're all donating towards the Mishkan in order for you to all rally and to make the Mishkan your center point and to unite around the Mishkan. With all the things coming together, then the Jewish people will be able to donate properly and to unite properly. So according to this explanation, again, it's not random that they came together, both things came together on the day after Yom Kippur. Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to get the Jewish people to unite around the Mishkan. He therefore spoke to them about everybody donating on the day after Yom Kippur, when the Jewish people are united because of Yom Kippur, because of the period of forgiveness of Yom Kippur, the forgiveness between each other that happens in Yom Kippur. The monetary disputes that Yom Kippur can't settle, that's what he sat down to judge, so he could settle those disputes and to make sure there be no impediments to the unity that they meant to create and come together through the building of the Mishkan. Okay. Excuse me. The next thing I'd like to address is share with you a thought, some thoughts from Vayakhel Kamenetsky on the Parsha. And okay. So Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky is also going to deal with the achdus, the unity factor that was present here in this parsha. Now the parsha begins. The Moshe assembled everyone together, and all the commentaries ask that we don't find explicitly in anywhere else in the Torah that Moshe assembled everyone together for the purpose of conveying to them what Hashem wants from them. You don't find this word, Vayakhel, Moshe assembled everyone together. And the question is why? Why here of all places is Moshe assembling everybody together in order to convey the messages that he gives? So Vayakhel Kamenetsky says the following idea. We know that when the Torah was given, the Torah tells us that the Jewish people united at a level of ki'ish echad b'leiv echad, like one man with one heart. And the Medrash says that when Hashem saw that, he said, now is the time to give the Torah. So Achdus, unity, was a prerequisite for the giving of the Torah. Rabbi Yaakov says the Chet To'egel, the sin of the golden calf, was actually the great, can't find the right word right in my head, right? But it was what broke apart the Jewish people. That unity that they attained as they waited for the Torah to be given, that unity was lost with the sin of the golden calf. How's that? So he points out that the Talmud tells us that by the sin of the golden calf, the Jewish people desired many gods. And he says each tribe made its own calf. That's an unbelievable idea. Now, what's the idea behind this? I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu was lost. They thought Moshe Rabbeinu was gone, and they wanted something to replace him. Why does each tribe need its own calf? And he explains, Rabbi Yaakov, that when the Talmud says they desire their own gods and therefore each one made their own god, that was because each tribe at this point of time, again, part of how things fell apart with the Jewish people was the fact they really couldn't agree on what this calf should exactly be. It was the Jewish people's decision that a calf is going to have to be now this image that's going to now replace Moshe. But it was something that they had to agree on. And their desire for many gods doesn't mean they desired many gods, but it was that each one had their desire of how they want that God to be. Each one had their opinion of what this calf exactly should look like, what exactly it should be. And therefore, they decided at the end that they couldn't agree, so each one made their own calf. So the sin of the golden calf had an aspect that it tore the Jewish people apart. Not only did they go and worship an idol, whichever way you explain the sin of the golden calf, not only did they fall apart when Moshe Rabbeinu seemed to be lost, not only did they fall apart in how they related to Hashem, but they fell apart how they related to each other. Because in how they would now decide what this calf was going to be, each one had their opinion exactly. Can't tell you what details they were fighting over, but Rabbi Yaakov suggests that each one had their different opinion of how this egel should be, how this calf should be, and therefore they just went and made their own calves. So the unity that the Jewish people had before the Torah was given was lost due to the sin of the golden calf. Says Rabbi Yaakov, the Mishkan, we know, was the atonement for the sin of the golden calf. And therefore, he says, I'm just going to read the words, and therefore, when Moshe came to warn the Jewish people about, or to exhort them regarding the construction of the Mishkan, his first job was to assemble everyone together. Meaning, to unite them in one place and for one goal. Now, so his point is that the sin of the golden calf broke the Jewish people apart. The unity they had by the giving of the Torah was lost. And now, when he was going to start telling them about the Mishkan, job number one was to bring them all together and to show them that they need to reunite and come together again in the construction of the Mishkan. Now, he doesn't elaborate on this. What exactly is the meaning behind the idea that now with the Mishkan, the first thing he had to do was tell them that they have to reunite? What's the connection between that and the Mishkan? Well, we could say, based on what we said before, the Mishkan was the ultimate uniter, and therefore they needed to unite. But what's the connection between that so they had a unity before the Torah was given. They lost unity. Now they have to get the unity again in order to have a Mishkan, because the Mishkan is meant to unite them. Maybe that's one way of looking at it. But I'd like to suggest that the meaning behind this idea is that, as many commentaries point out, the Mishkan is meant to be a continuation of the giving of the Torah. Hashem came down on Mount Sinai and he gave the Jewish people the Torah. That process was meant to continue at a certain level through the Mishkan. The divine presence comes to the Mishkan. It speaks to the tabernacle. It speaks to Moshe. It tells Moshe what mitzvah to tell the Jewish people, and the process continues. And therefore, if the Mishkan is a continuation of the giving of the Torah, so What was a prerequisite for the giving of the Torah? The unity of the Jewish people. They attained like one man with one heart. That was lost by the sin of the golden calf. If the Mishkan now is meant to be the continuation of the giving of the Torah, so again, they have to unite. They have to come together again. That is a prerequisite. That is what's needed in order for the Torah to be given to the Jewish people. So therefore, when Moshe now is speaking about the Mishkan, he tells them he brings them together to show that they need to unite, because for the Mishkan to be the continuation of the giving of the Torah, that needs the unity of the Jewish people. So perhaps that's the understanding behind this thought from Vayakhel Kamenetsky. Now he brings down another thought, and that thought is that later on in the Parsha, Perek Lamed Vav Pasuk Zayin, chapter 36, verse 7. So Moshe tells the Jewish people to donate, and boy, do they donate, to the point where we read, "V'malacha yisadayim l'chol ha'malacha," and there was enough and even more for what they needed in order to create the Mishkan. The Jewish people went all out. They were told to give, and within a short period of time, a day or two, I believe, by then everything was done. They even had, and they had more than they needed. So Rabbi Yaakov makes an interesting point. Think about it from the perspective of the Jewish people. Here it was that Moshe is telling them to donate. In order to make the Mishkan, to have all the gold and silver that was needed, there was a lot of gold and silver needed for that. And there was a lot of work put into constructing the Mishkan. How long were they supposed to have that Mishkan for? We know they had it for a very long time. They had it for the 40 years in the desert. They brought it with them into Eretz Yisrael. They had it for the Mishkan, I believe, the total for the Mishkan, I can't remember. It's a couple hundred years. Couple hundred years they had it. Rabbi Yaakov writes, that wasn't the original plan. The Jewish people at this point of time, after the sin of the golden calf, what was the next stage? They received the Torah, they sent the golden calf, they had to go through getting the Torah again. Done. Forgiven and done. What's the next step? Going to Eretz Yisrael. Now, that plan also got messed up with the sin of the spies. But the plan was to go into Eretz Yisrael right then and there. And if not for the sin of the spies, as many commentaries point out, taking over the land of Israel would have been a cakewalk. It wouldn't have taken much. It wouldn't have taken as long as it did. Rabbi Yaakov writes like this: They only really needed it for a few months. If not for the sin of the spies, they would have immediately entered the land of Israel. They right away would have built a Beis HaMikdash. Now we know that the process actually took much longer. The Jewish people, it took 7 years to conquer, it took 7 years to divide, and it took many years later until the Beis HaMikdash was finally built by King Solomon. It took hundreds of years for that. Rabbi Yaakov is suggesting that that's not what would have happened if not for the sin of the spies. If not for the sin of the spies, they would have come in, they would have taken over the land, they could have built the Beis HaMikdash right away, which means, therefore, that according to the original plan, how long were they supposed to have this Mishkan for? A few months. Not very long. Nonetheless, the Jewish people went all out in donating towards this Mishkan. There was a mitzvah to build a Mishkan. Hashem says, I want to dwell amongst you. The Jewish people didn't say, well, it's only been for a couple of months anyway, so why bother? Why put so much into it? There was a mitzvah to build a Mishkan. They wanted to have the Shekhinah divine presence amongst them, and therefore they went all out. And it's really a sign of the greatness of the Jewish people and how beloved having this mitzvah was to them. And, Pirkei Avos teaches us, have a yizar mitzvah kala v'chamura. Be careful with a easy or light mitzvah as with one that is more serious. Because you don't know the reward for a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah tzitzis, very simple mitzvah, doesn't take much, but the reward for mitzvah tzitzis is tremendous. We don't know the reward for mitzvahs, and therefore our sages teach us, don't take any mitzvah lightly. Here too, It's a couple of months having a Mishkan. It's a real temporary building, a real temporary temple. But that wasn't a reason for them to say, so why invest so much into it? The mitzvah was beloved to them. Wanting divine presence amongst them was beloved to them. And therefore, whatever it took, and Hashem told them what was needed for that. It took a lot. But one would think that perhaps the reaction wouldn't have been so great because it's only temporary. But nope. Even when it was temporary, it was beloved to them, and they immediately gave as much as they could to the point that there was even extra. That shows how beloved the mitzvah was to them, and it's a mitzvah to show us how beloved mitzvah should be to us, no matter how it appears to us, how small it may appear to us. One doesn't know the reward for mitzvahs, and therefore do it to the best of your ability. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Thank you for listening.